He asks, can Andy talk a little about the conversation that he had with Tony Rodrigues about his 20 and back experience seems important for the truth movement?
No, that's not germane to tonight's discussion.
Okay.
And I'm fairly certain that, unfortunately, Tony is in the second group of Mars claimants and secret space program claimants who I do not believe. So I don't want to vitiate true history, what I've been sharing, with somebody who I believe has virtually demonstrated that he is not sharing true history. He may be sharing true beliefs. I'm holding my assessment of Tony's work in abeyance, but I must say that we can't keep returning to the false thread in this area and preserve true history. So I am offended by the suggestion, and I would just urge everybody to step back and realize that there are three things that the U.S. intelligence and the military intelligence community seeks to conceal. And they are the existence of certain classified programs and projects, who was in them, and what technologies were either used for or developed in those programs. So we can't be so focused on today's claimant, the one who has written a book or is starting to be booked at conferences, to say we shouldn't study true history and realize that some claimants in this area have been telling the truth, and some have been a mix of, many have been a mix of opportunists seeking commercial advantage, fantasists suffering delusional disorders, and, I'm sorry to say, government operatives spreading untrue history, falsehood. And so that would be my answer. I'm not condemning Tony. I spoke with him at length for about 3 hours, and I am doubtful about his ultimate veracity. But now that I'm legally blind, unfortunately, I can't read his book. I'm going to try to have either an audio book or somebody read it to me. Mm-hmm. But I can tell you that there has been a spate of false claimants, and I don't think it's fair to me as somebody who has demonstrated the truth of what I've been saying. In fact, next week on July 21st, on the Quest for Truth, I might as well announce it now, I will be sharing 10 pieces of hearsay evidence and 10 pieces of what the law calls direct evidence or actual evidence, evidence that is admissible at trial that prove my claims. I have proved my claims. And so, frankly, in regard to the super chat, is it fair to me when people are still saying, oh, Andy hasn't proved his claims, and I have proved my claims, to answer people whose stories I haven't even been able to evaluate yet? So let's step back and kind of avoid that pattern. Yeah. Honestly, it's not fair to me. And it's not fair to the other individuals who have been telling the truth, who have come forward and been attacked. In the area of the secret space program, the five gentlemen who I know went to Mars include myself, and I was blinded, William Whitecrow, and I'm fairly certain he was assassinated, Ken Johnston and Bernie Mendez, who were given memory problems, and Brett Stillings, who was given forms of mental imbalance. All of them undeserving because they served our country by going to the Red Planet via a new, dangerous, and experimental technology, the so-called aeronautical repositioning chamber, under the direction of a very still quite alive Howard Robard Hughes, who died not in 1976, but in 2001. That has been demonstrated to me by a retired Air Force general. And I would also note that I have brought forward 4 of my fellow astronauts who I was trained with and on the surface with. And I would beseech all of you to ask that of the emerging claimants in the area of time travel. For example, the individual who generated Apex admitted that they were all just stories, short stories about time travel. And in the area of the secret space program, we have a group of claimants who even claim 20, 40, 60 years worth of 20 years and back, and they can't name a single comrade or colleague on the moon, on Mars, on Ceres. Okay? And they make a variety of other false claims that I will be contextualizing in my appearance before the Secret Space Program Conference in Silicon Valley, California on September 16th and 17th.
Awesome.
So please just let's step back and not be hyper-focused on this spate of Secret Space Program claimants,
right,
because they're not doing the same thing
right,
that those of us who have really been involved in time travel
right,
and really gone off planet for our country have already demonstrated. And they're just sort of stealing our thunder and making stuff up. But anyway, that's what's going on. I hate to be viewed as a negativist for framing that argument, but it's the truth. Doesn't the truth movement have to be devoted to the truth rather than folklore, rather than science fiction fantasy?
And I think, for anyone watching or listening to anyone you're interested in their story of, and you want to ask them a question about something they were involved in or someone that they knew or mentioned. I mean, here you have Andrew D. Basiago. He's given so much facts, so many facts, dates, addresses, people, everything,
comrades,
and witnesses. So, there's a million questions that I even still have, and we talk a lot off the air. There's a lot of questions I still have, and none of them have to do with other people, that they have to do with your specific experiences. Like, what did it smell like?
That serves a good function in ufology, in exopolitics, in the emerging literature of the Secret Space Program, however it pans out. And I'm not saying I know the truth. Look, a couple thoughts about historiography and true history. First of all, absence of evidence does not connote evidence of absence. So, for example, if somebody fails to share any name of a comrade with me, we can say, well, that's a threat to the validity of their claims, but it doesn't mean they didn't have comrades. Maybe their memories were suppressed. Maybe they forget. Maybe it was so long ago. I mean, I time traveled for the government 50 years ago. Yeah. It's a miracle based on the memory that I was gifted with at birth, that in my book, Once Upon a Time in the Time Stream, I'm going to be listing about, at least 25 project participants. Also, in the emerging literature of the Secret Space Program, I came forward and received the first person eyewitness testimony of 4 of my colleagues. But just because somebody doesn't do that, I can say, okay, I'm suspicious that they're not telling the truth. But you can't prove absence of evidence. You can't prove evidence of absence based on absence of evidence. The other thought I would share is something, in fact, that was said by the rather wise individual Donald Henry Rumsfeld, who was not an ogre. He was not a villain. He was just an all-American guy that my dad and I knew on the project. In fact, I have several personal memories about Rumsfeld that I'll be sharing in my book that demonstrate what a neat American he was, a neat person. He once said, "We know what we know what we don't know, but we don't know what we don't know." And that's why I'm not becoming the hierophants, the judge and jury of the Secret Space Program. All I'm saying is, look, beware. There are 2 threads here, and I think I've detected what those threads are. So anyway, let's think about that and just step back and say, okay, Andy's on his podcast now. What can we ask about Andy's experiences? Because if we ask me about Tony's experiences, which are certainly Tony's right to share, and I welcome that use of the First Amendment freedom of speech and press and assembly, as it were, what we do is we engage in crossfire. Crossfire has contaminated ufology, exopolitics, the discussion of time travel, let's say the crossfire between me and Al Bielek, and indeed the whole area of what's called the paranormal, which in fact includes the parapolitical, the parascientific, and in fact, much of it, emergent truths that were concealed by the world's governments. I mean, science fiction was invented as a literary genre to conceal things that were actually emerging. Arthur C. Clarke and Robert Heinlein, 2 of the greats of science fiction, had desks next to each other at British intelligence during World War II. Okay, so like I said, let's just step back and leave Crossfire behind us by focusing on a particular claimant's discussion at that time, so we can understand what they're saying thoroughly. But by the way, one question I would have for Tony is, Tony, I'm going to be discussing my molestation at age 5 by a physician attached to Project Pegasus.
Wow.
I attacked that gentleman severely by biting him and putting a huge gash in his male member. Okay? Now, I shared that not to discuss molestation, but because of that incident, my father explained to me that it was the right thing because I protected all the kids in the program. I had essentially engaged in a heroic defense of my child chrononauts on the program. He would have continued to be molested by this evil physician if I had not done so and revealed what he had done to my dad and the program. Had my dad, Jack Pruitt, and Paul Weber from Project Pegasus not gone over and practically killed this evil physician. And as a result of that entire incident, I was selected to go as far down the rabbit hole of applied quantum physics as any of the 140 American school children born roughly around 1958, 59, 60, 61, 62 in Project Pegasus. So my question to Tony Rodrigues would be, Tony, what is the relevance? How is it germane to your experiences in the secret space program that you were a so-called sex slave on Earth before going there? I don't see the connection initially, but then again, Tony, I haven't read your book, so please forgive me if I missed something. But those are the kind of questions with a view to true history that I would urge all of our listeners to begin asking of all claimants in these related areas of emergent truth.